Hey there, this is Ann Teagarden with episode 51 of the Unveiled podcast. And thanks to all of you wonderful women out there for tuning in. And I pray that God is using these episodes to bring joy and peace into your home and into your heart. So if you've been following along for the last few weeks, I've been discussing overcoming stress because that's what I'm working on right now. And God is really trying to help me with that. And I talked about last week how he replaces our stress with peace when we surrender things to him. So why is it so hard to surrender it? Sometimes even after I surrender it, I take it back again. Do you ever do that? And I think one of the reasons is that deep down, maybe we don't truly trust God, or we don't trust him in that particular situation. I think sometimes it's our past experiences that make us feel like we can't trust God for something. When I was 16 years old, my mother was diagnosed with lymphoma cancer, and I watched my always healthy mom quickly become debilitated and die within 7 months. And life was totally out of my control. Right before she died, my big sister moved out of state for her first job. Less than a week after the funeral, my local grandmother had a massive heart attack and was in the hospital and rehab for months, which kept my father very busy with her care. And I felt so alone and overwhelmed at becoming the woman of the house. Now, I had prayed and prayed for her healing, and yet she passed. So, where was God in all of that? My trust was really shaken, and I began to rely on myself. After all, I had trusted God to keep my mom alive since I obviously still needed her, and He didn't. And that makes it hard to trust Him the next time for me. I know that I want a certain situation to turn out a certain way, and I'm not sure God has the same game plan, so I'd better not surrender it to him. Or at least that's how my faulty thinking can go. Do you have past traumas or unanswered prayers that make it hard to trust God and others? I get that. It's real. But I'm here to say that God is trustworthy. I have learned that over and over. He didn't answer my prayer to heal my mom. He didn't answer my prayer to get pregnant. He didn't answer my prayer to heal my friend Teresa from cancer. But I trust him because he is good, and I have experienced his goodness so many times in my life. I know women who were severely abused as children that love and trust God today. It is possible. In fact, it's incredibly freeing. Now, I will freely admit that I still struggle with wanting to be the one in control, and it's a daily trusting and surrendering. We may not be able to trust God to do what we want him to do or in our timing. Yeah, that's true. After all, we're not God's boss. We have to understand also that sin is in the world and we are not robots. And sometimes we're experiencing the effects of other people's sin. But we can always trust God to bring some good from it if we let him. Also, I've had to learn that God's ways are not my ways. Isaiah 55:9 says, "As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." I have to remind myself of that one on a regular basis. I don't think like God does. God can see the end from the beginning, and we cannot. We don't always see the big picture. One time, God told me that my present moment is like one square of a giant quilt. I have to step back to see the whole quilt and how the pattern all fits together to create a masterpiece. To trust God, I have to accept what is. I have to trust him for what will be or what can be. Ephesians 3:20 says, "Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us, to him be the glory." We know that nothing is impossible for God. But that's not really the issue, is it? I think our issue is often, will he do it for me? I know he can do it, but will he do it for me? To trust him, we have to know that he loves us. We have to know it deep in our hearts. It's easier to surrender to someone we trust than someone we don't. It's like that trust fall exercise that's so often done in group settings where one person stands behind another and the front one is supposed to fall back without looking and trust the person behind them to catch them. And it's hard to do that. It reminds me of a time when I was at a worship service with college friends way back. And we were standing up singing. And when the singing ended, I went to sit down without looking. And I totally fell on the floor because there was no chair behind me. One of my friends thought it would be really funny to remove my chair while we were all standing up singing. I don't think he thought I wouldn't look before sitting down, but I just trusted the chair to be there. I didn't need to look, or so I thought. That's our goal with God. We want to get to a place where we know God's got this and I can trust him without looking behind me. He will be there to catch me when I fall. Deuteronomy 31:8 says, "The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged." In fact, there are 4 different verses in the Bible that say, "He will never leave you nor forsake you." What a comforting thought. I repeat that one a lot to myself. You, me, we are never alone. Never. You are never forsaken or forgotten. God knows your name. He knows the number of hairs on your head. He knows your hopes, your dreams, and even your greatest fears. And you can trust him with all things, I promise. Give him the hurts, the abandonment, the trauma, the abuse of the past. Surrender those to him and ask him for healing and freedom. Trust that he can set you free from your past, and trust him with your future as well. When we learn to trust God, it will make it easier to trust our husbands and our friends. We will be free to let go of control and surrender things into God's hands, and we will be less stressed when we're not trying to control the universe. Smiley face. So a practical step toward learning to trust God is to begin to understand who he really is. This week, find Bible verses that bring you comfort and remind you of who God is, and post them where you will see them several times a day. Say them out loud. Believe them. And you can test God. Malachi 3:10 says, "Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it." Wow, I love that promise. We can test him and he will pour out his blessing. Trust him with something you're struggling with, and then sit back and see what happens. If you grab control back again, just surrender it again. The more we trust and see him come through, the easier it is to trust him in the future. Remember, God's got this. I pray that your heart will be open and you will trust God more. He is a wonderful father to his children. I hope that gave you some clarity on why it's so hard to surrender things to God. You can help more women find help through this podcast by sharing it. That would be so helpful to me. Also, if you would leave comments and write a review of the podcast in general on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen, that would also help more people to find it. If your marriage is struggling, don't let it die. Don't rely on yourself. Get help. Okay, you can reach out to us if you'd like. We do marriage mentoring through Synergia Marriage Mentoring. And you can reach me at Anne, ANNE, at synergiamm.com, SYNERGIAMM.com. Remember, you are never alone or forsaken or forgotten. You are loved. You are enough. God's got this. Go in peace.